I've been there, scrolling through endless listings, eye-watering pictures, and glossy marketing copy, only to end up with a TV that looks flat and lifeless in the living room. The biggest gripe I hear from friends who've bought a new screen is that the picture looks great on the box, but when you actually turn it on, the blacks are grey, the colors feel off, and the whole thing just doesn't live up to the hype. That's why I wanted to dig into a model that promises to change the game and see if it really delivers, or if it's another case of marketing over promise. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Sony 55-inch OLED BRAVIA, model K55XR80, is positioned as a cinema-grade TV for both movie nights and next-gen gaming. It touts pure black OLED contrast, billions of colors, and a processor that supposedly makes every frame look studio calibrated. Those sound like the exact things that separate a decent TV from a truly immersive one, but the question is how they play out when you actually set it up in a typical apartment, hook it up to a PlayStation 5, and binge a few streaming services. First off, the setup experience is surprisingly painless. The TV arrives in a fairly compact box for a 55-inch unit, and the stand is sturdy enough to sit on a standard TV console. When you power it on, Sony's Quick Start mode brings the picture up within a few seconds, no long warm-up period like you might see on older OLEDs. The remote feels familiar, and the on-screen menu is organized around the Google TV interface, which means your favorite apps, Netflix, Disney+, Prime Video, and even YouTube are all right there without needing an extra streaming stick. The one-place integration actually works. You can search for a title and the TV pulls up every service that has it, saving the hassle of hopping between apps. Now, the real test is the picture. Watching a recent HDR movie, the OLED panel lives up to the pure black claim. In a dimly lit room, the blacks are genuinely black, not just dark gray, which makes the bright highlights pop in a way that feels almost three-dimensional. The color reproduction is rich, the reds in a sunset scene are vivid without looking oversaturated, and the blues in a night city shot retain detail. Because it's an OLED, each pixel can turn off completely, which eliminates the halo effect you sometimes see on LCDs with local dimming. This is exactly the kind of depth that makes a home theater experience feel like you're sitting in a theater seat. For gamers, the TV's claim of being perfect for PlayStation 5 holds up in practice. The HDMI 2.1 ports support 4K at 120 Hz, which means you can actually hit the high frame rate modes in games like Ratchet and Clank, Rift Apart or Demon's Souls without any noticeable input lag. Sony's Game Mode Pro reduces processing latency, and I noticed that the controller response felt as snappy as it does on a dedicated gaming monitor. The HDR performance shines here too. The dynamic range in a game like Horizon Forbidden West looks stunning, with bright skies and deep shadows coexisting without crushing details. If you're the type who flips between streaming a drama and dropping into a fast-paced shooter, this TV handles the transition without a hitch. But it's not all smooth sailing. OLED technology still has a few practical trade-offs that matter for everyday use. The panel's peak brightness, while adequate for most dim or moderately lit rooms, can struggle in a sun-filled living space. If you have large windows and keep the curtains open during the day, the HDR highlights can look a bit muted compared to a high-end LED that can push 1000+ nits. That's something to keep in mind if you plan on watching in bright daylight. The other concern that pops up with OLEDs is potential burn-in. Sony includes a pixel shift feature that moves static elements around just enough to reduce risk, but if you tend to leave a static UI like a news ticker or a gaming HUD on the screen for many hours a day, you should be aware that the risk, while low, isn't zero. Sound is another area where expectations need to be managed. The built-in speakers are decent for casual viewing, delivering clear dialogue and a respectable bass for a thin panel. However, they won't replace a dedicated soundbar or a small home theater system if you want truly immersive audio. Since the TV is meant to be a centerpiece for movies and gaming, many reviewers end up adding a separate audio solution, which adds to the overall cost. Speaking of cost, the Sony OLED sits in the premium price bracket. It's not a bargain, but the value you get isn't just in the headline specs, it's in the consistency of the picture across all content types. If you already own a PlayStation 5 and spend a good chunk of your leisure time on high-end streaming services, the combination of OLED contrast, accurate colors, and low latency can feel worth the premium. For a family that watches a lot of daytime TV in a bright,